Hi, thank you very much indeed, Bruce. Yes, welcome everybody. Yeah, one of my little hobbies in life is getting more letters after my name, which is a sad thing, showing how superficial I am, isn't it? But anyway, there you go. So I'm very pleased that the Royal College have agreed that we can keep our post-nomials. Anyway, enough about me. Look at those beautiful eyes that you see on there. I just think it's fantastic, the sort of views that we can get as we look into either the normal eye or the abnormal exotic eye. So we'll start off today. We're going to do rather than, I think we had rabbits, rodents, and reptiles. Actually, we're going to start off with reptiles and a few amphibians. We're then going to go on to raptors in the way of birds of prey and other birds. We're going to do reptile ophthalmology, avian ophthalmology, and then rabbits and guinea pigs to finish off the session. So we'll start off with as I say, reptiles. And actually, reptiles show you what I call the dichotomy of exotic animal medicine generally and ophthalmology perhaps particularly. There are conditions where you have to extrapolate from what you know about mammals. I mean, that's the whole, for those of us who do exotics without having a particular expertise in it, you've got to just go from what you already know on mammals, the cats and dogs that you see every day. So, for instance, this redfoot tortoise here, you can see with this white blob, if you'll excuse a technical term, in the middle of its cornea. We have to think, what on earth is that? And here you can make an extrapolation from, if that were a dog, we'd say that's most likely to be a corneal lipidosis. And indeed, in these redfoot tortoises, there's an inherited corneal lipidosis that occurs in these animals. And the other things it could have been were corneal edema or corneal lipidosis, corneal scarring. But actually, just the way that it looks and the very obvious edge to it shows that really what we're dealing with there is a lipidosis. And that's one of the troubles I think about ophthalmology, is it's about pattern recognition. Have you seen it before? And if you have seen it before, it's an easy diagnosis to make. If you haven't seen it before, can be quite difficult to come up with a list of differentials for the condition. So this morning we'll look through a lot of different patterns in exotic animal ophthalmology and try and show you what they are, so that when you see them again in the future, you'll know where to go from there. So there are conditions where you can extrapolate from what you know of the cat and dog, and then there are conditions where the differences mean that you need a completely new perspective on the condition. So here is a snake with what looks like a bulging eye. And in fact, this used to be called, we'll talk about this a bit later on, when we talk about the spectacle, the eyelid covering of these animals, but this used to be called pseudobuphthalmus, because it was thought that it was like the eye. Buphthalmus is oxide, the eye enlarging in size, but actually the eye under there is a completely normal size. What this is a situation where the nasolacrimal duct is blocked and the spectacle is massively protruding because there's fluid gradually increasing under it. So here, if you thought that was an enlarged eye and you thought, oh gosh, we have to remove the eye, you'd get in there and suddenly find that you've got a normal eye underneath, and that you had taken off the spectacle from the front of the eye, which would be pretty much a disaster. So that's where today we're going to look at most of the situations where you can take what you know about the cat and dog and then put it over into either the reptile or the raptor or the rabbit. But then there are others where you need a new perspective on the condition. So that's where we're going this morning. Where should we start? Well, maybe we should start with something like a common condition, like a corneal ulcer. So here's a little frog with a corneal ulcer, and there the extrapolation is: put a drop of fluorescein in, squeeze some water over to flush out any excess fluorescein, and there you've got the corneal ulcer really nicely shown there, just as it would be in the dog, except that there are differences because the eye is so bulgy and there aren't normal eyelids to close on this, so that it's much more difficult to get a corneal ulcer in an amphibian to heal than it is in a dog or cat. You could do a third eyelid flap in a dog or cat, but there isn't a third eyelid flap to do on a frog. You could put in some drops in a dog or cat without thinking about systemic toxicity, but the frog has such a permeable skin and is so small that if you put a drop in there, you've got to worry about a significant amount of the drug actually being absorbed into the frog. So if you put gentamicin into that eye, watch out that you haven't got a significant absorption of gentamicin that might give you a nephrotoxicity at the same time. So here's glaucoma. Here's the corneal edema we saw before in that redfoot tortoise. The lipidosis that showed a really obvious white lesion on the eye. Here's a corneal edema, which is a far more bluey grey, we'd say like a ground glass appearance to the front of the eye, and in the globe that's enlarged. And well, actually, to tell you the truth, you wouldn't want to try and be giving a drop to reduce the pressure in this eye. In fact, we don't even know what's the normal pressure in a frog eye. Gosh, that's an interesting little project for one of next year's students, isn't it? I don't know. I have no idea that anybody's ever looked at the intraocular pressure in a frog eye. Anyway, so you might say, oh, let's remove the eye. But if you remove that eye, here's a difference. If you remove the eye because you thought, oh, I'll extrapolate from what I do in a normal dog or cat, actually the frog needs both its eyes because the eye impinges on the dorsal border of the buccal cavity, so that if you remove an eye, suddenly you find the frog can't swallow properly, and you've got a frog that suddenly can't eat. So beware of extrapolating too far, even in situations where it looks very obvious that a glaucoma in a frog must be similar to a glaucoma in a dog or a cat. There are things like neoplasia, common to all species. You can extrapolate there. And interestingly, from an amphibian perspective, we see that neoplasia is seen at higher prevalences in animals from polluted waterways. This is some work being done in the States. So again, there's some very interesting situations where the animal can be a sentinel species for toxic environmental factors. So here's a little Xenopus toad with a tumor of one of its orbital glands there. And so, as I say, yes, amphibians can be sentinel species for more general pollution, more and more important in these days of environmental toxicity. Here's something, again, a really a common condition in captive amphibians. And again, look at those white blobs on the surface of the eye there. What's that going to be apart from lipid? And what we find is that in a number of captive amphibians, at the time they're thinking about spawning, they're looking to reproduce and lay eggs, they can't find an appropriate place to lay their eggs to spawn, and so the amount of lipid that they've raised in their circulating blood to put into those eggs ends up going on into the eye there, and you get this lipid keratopathy, as we'd say there. And you can see here another frog with the lipid lesions in there, and when we take a histology of that, and you see the significant, if I can use my you can see here the significant amount of lipid just under the epithelium in that cornea there, and it's particularly seen, not only seen, but particularly seen in spawning females, and that shows some of the problems of exotics actually are all what do we say? 90% of the problems that we see in exotics are about how they're housed, inappropriate housing. And so in this situation, the female frog